What is rationality? Rationality, being a nebulous, imprecise term, can mean many different things. However, my goal here is not to explore everything the word could or should mean. The goal is to develop a usable, practical understanding of rationality. So it is not productive to try to answer the question, what is rationality, by coming up with a dictionary definition of rationality. A sentence of the form, rationality is this. Rationality is too complex a concept to explain with a dictionary definition, or perhaps too simple a concept, if you prefer. Here is a first pass attempt at explaining rationality in practical terms. Rationality is in part a set of practices people employ in solving problems. Rationality is involved in the processes we use to organize ourselves into complex societies, develop technologies which improve our standard of living, cure diseases, discover the truth, and solve resource distribution problems through systems such as regulated, capitalist, socialist, and mixed model economies, among many other things. So given the immense practical importance of rationality, we don't want to approach the understanding of rationality as a purely theoretical problem. We want to approach it as a practical problem, so that the solution will be as useful as possible to as many people as possible. My goal here is not to develop the most rigorous theory possible, but merely to give the most usable and yet correct explanation of rationality I can. One can study rationality from a psychological perspective by thinking about people's inner states, primarily their processes of belief formation, and by making prescriptive recommendations about how to form beliefs in order to be rational. I think it's very informative to think about rationality by thinking about the kind of moral virtues that a person should seek to have in order to be rational. Here are some moral virtues that I think of as contributing to or being requirements for rationality, in no particular order. Fairness, even-handedness, patience, attention to detail, open-mindedness, skepticism of authority, self-confidence, love for learning, skill at listening, skill at articulating, honesty, thirst for truth. Rationality is not a natural state of the human mind. It's a state which is achieved through hard and determined effort towards the right kinds of goals. It's a state which is never perfectly achieved. One is never finished in the development of one's rationality. It's a lifelong learning experience, a path, not a destination. The heart of rationality I also call the Tao of rationality. The Tao of rationality is a mystery, a placeholder for our lack of comprehensive understanding of our own ability to reason, consequent of our mind's present inability to comprehend themselves in any great depth. So the Tao Te Ching purports to contain ancient wisdom applicable to every kind of problem. In this case, we're mining it for wisdom about the practice of rationality. I'll give you a passage, and then I'll tell you what it brings to mind for me. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. And so that's from chapter 1 of Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching. It's a good book. I would recommend it. Okay, so here's what that passage brings to mind for me that pertains to rationality. Human ability to reason outruns our ability to understand our processes of reasoning on a second-order level. Reasoning is a capability of our minds. Our minds are very complex, and our understanding of them is very rudimentary. Our processes of reasoning are the outcome of a process of biological and social evolution, consisting of the Darwinian evolution of our brains and the transmission and evolution of intellectual DNA forward through history, through processes such as thought and communication. Our rules for reasoning are essentially encoded in our languages. Our languages are complex organs with many subdivisions, such as mathematical language and technical jargon of various fields, which are outposts dotted around a complex, generalized, everyday language. The most important wisdom about reasoning is contained in the rules governing our everyday languages. Good argumentation is mostly a matter of using everyday language in a way which adheres rigorously to common sense best practices of clarity and thoroughness, as well as correctness. So in other words, deeply understanding common sense about how to use language when attempting to discern the truth is the most important aspect of the development of practical rationality. Each of us is much more hidden than we are visible to ourselves and each other, as most of our functioning goes on unobserved inside our bodies and our unconscious minds. Our rationality is a still pond which runs deep. On the surface, it is receptive to outside impressions, and it reflects the world back at the world. Its depths are dark and mysterious. A person who wishes to become more rational must seek to manifest their inner rationality in a greater proportion of their conscious experience. They must seek to hone the skill of being that still pond which reflects the world back at the world. In my opinion, this is ultimately a spiritual quest, where one is led to seek to heal old emotional wounds, to face one's fears, and to nurture one's confidence and humility alike, in order to have fewer mental weights holding down one's rationality. So here's more from the Tao Te Ching. This is from chapter 8. I'll read it and then comment on it. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus, it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. Good reasoning is full of uniform and repeatable patterns. Some of these repeatable patterns can be systematized. For example, deductive logic, mathematics, and science all have a corpus of repeatable reasoning techniques of various degrees of formality. Understanding these patterns is important to the development of rationality. However, knowing all the techniques of rationality does not give one the practical procedural knowledge of being rational. When you have names and forms, know that they are provisional. When you have institutions, know where their functions should end. Knowing when to stop, you can avoid any danger. And so that was from chapter 32. So the heart of rationality is a groundedness in reality and a willingness to be swayed by reality, created by a kind of emptiness and lack of preconception. And here's from chapter 11. We join together spokes in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Of course, the moral virtues associated with rationality are merely one aspect of rationality. In my opinion, they are a critical one, which should be discussed explicitly in treatises on rationality. In my opinion, anybody who seeks to become more rational should seek to cultivate in themselves the virtues I listed above: fairness, even-handedness, etc., to seek the company of people who have such virtues, and to learn from sources which have such virtues. I would further encourage the reader to reflect on the deeper nature of rationality in an introspective fashion, to study their own mind, how it works, how it processes reality, and to form judgments on which processes are rational and which are irrational. In addition to looking at rationality from psychological, moral, and spiritual perspectives, we can also study rationality from a behavioral perspective by studying human behavior that exhibits rationality and trying to formulate rules that describe and explain what makes rational behavior rational. So rationality has to do with two primary areas of human behavior: communication and decision-making. We employ rationality in communicating with each other, as for example, when employing arguments to persuade others of something. We also employ rationality in decision-making, as when making a purchasing decision, and in innumerable other situations. In practice, most rationality-related issues can be studied in the context of norms of assertion. Studying norms of assertion is studying the majority of what there is to study about rationality, at least in my awareness. Of course, other topics besides norms of assertion, e.g., beliefs and decision-making, are important. Most rationality-related issues apply analogously across all subdomains of rationality, e.g., norms of assertion, beliefs, and decision-making. Therefore, by studying one of these subdomains, one learns about all of them. However, each should also be studied individually to learn about issues specific to that subdomain. I find it more effective, as a way of teaching, to focus primarily on one of the many angles from which we can study rationality. This is because we can go deeper into that one angle by spending more time on it, and doing so sheds light on all the other angles. The primary angle I choose is norms of assertion, primarily for the reasons that it's the one I understand best, and it's the one I best understand how to talk about. One thing about norms of assertion that makes them easy to talk about is that unlike beliefs, which are mental phenomena and therefore only privately observable, assertions are objective, publicly observable occurrences. Our language is primarily for talking about publicly observable things, and it's easier overall to have shared understanding of publicly observable things. Both of these factors lead me to favor focusing my philosophical writing on publicly observable things for the most part, and when possible. If I can explain the same thing either in terms of publicly observable things or in terms of privately observable things, I am more likely to choose to explain it in terms of publicly observable things, because I am more likely to think that that route will lead to a clearer explanation. So norms of assertion are an important subtopic in the more general topic of laws of rationality. The laws of rationality, I'll say, are all rules of speech and behavior such that if we break them, we can justly be called irrational. A simple example of a law of rationality is the law that if you agree to the assertion that A and B, then you should also be willing to agree to the assertion that A. So probably the reader knows or imagines that there are many laws of rationality. And of course, like each of them, there has at least been some dispute about whether it's true, I imagine. So like I'm not taking law of rationality Well, it's tricky, right? So, yes, discovering exactly what the laws of rationality are is the problem. So, on my reading, discovering what the laws of rationality are has been the foremost goal of the study of rationality since that study's inception. As long as we don't understand and apply the laws of rationality, we will run the risk of being irrational without having any idea that we are being irrational. That's why I think it's valuable to learn well the understanding, or so-called, humans have had of the laws of rationality for thousands of years, as well as the understanding, or so-called, we have recently gained, and to try to push forward our evolving understanding, or so-called, of the laws of rationality. In the section titled Rules and Laws, I noted that all laws are binding in some sense. In what sense are the laws of rationality binding? In many different senses, in many different contexts. In debates, the laws of rationality are binding in the sense that in the world of debates, there is a loose approximation of a Nash equilibrium around following the laws of rationality as well as one is able. The laws of rationality are broken on a regular basis in debates, probably in most debates. However, there is a general agreement that in some sense, those who break the rules of rationality are not debating correctly, and those who break them are more likely to lose debates. In academic contexts, the laws of rationality are binding as a matter of professional standards. In the context of academic publishing, the laws of rationality are enforceable and corruptible by the peer review process. In many professional contexts, such as when performing a technical job, such as software development or security analysis, the laws of rationality are binding as a matter of professional ethics, especially in mission-critical scenarios. In serious contexts where you need to solve a problem, rationality is usually applicable. In these cases, the laws of rationality are binding in the sense that following them usually maximizes your likelihood of success. And there's a loose approximation of a Nash equilibrium in the global game of society around making decisions as rationally as one is able. If following a set of principles of rationality reduced your likelihood of success, then those principles would be a flawed way of thinking about rationality. Observe that this is not a no true Scotsman fallacy, because we are not changing the definition of rationality in an ad hoc way to deal with counterexamples. Rather, the principle that methods that systematically cause you to fail aren't rational is part of our common sense, sort of by definition, understanding of rationality. See Eliezer Yudkowsky, Rationality is Systematized Winning, if you wish to be further persuaded of this. There is no centralized authority on rationality. Generally speaking, rationality's dominance can be attributed to the fact that it gets shit done, that it wins. No centralized enforcement is necessary to maintain its dominance. It's a natural consequence of the way that rationality relates to human society as a whole, which is a consequence of properties of rationality, human society, humans, and the world. This situation also means that the dominant understanding of rationality should, over time, naturally tend towards greater correctness. In short, the laws of rationality are organically binding. Of course, rationality is in competition with other conflicting forces. For example, ignorance. Rationality isn't always dominant, and this qualifier should be stated, though I don't believe it conflicts with anything I've said. Here's a basic law of rationality, a basic norm of assertion, which I'll call the law of evidence. If you assert a statement, you should, ideally, be able to explain your reasons for believing it, and those reasons should, ideally, be good ones. If you assert a statement, and somebody asks you why it's true, and you can't provide any good answer, it's generally an uncomfortable situation where one feels some social pressure to take back the assertion. Uh, the law of evidence is widely accepted because it's a good rule to follow if you want the truth, generally speaking. If you want the truth, it's a good idea to be skeptical of what other people say, to ask for the reasons that people assert things, and to doubt people who can't give good reasons for what they assert. If you want to be regarded as a truth teller, it's a good idea to be able to give good reasons for the things you assert. The law of evidence is the basic rational norm of assertion, in a sense. Most other laws of rationality have to do with legislating what reasons do and do not adequately support an assertion. In that sense, they are elaborations on the law of evidence. Legislating the quality of various reasons for assertions is our main task in the rest of this text. Before starting on that, though, I need to clarify what I am talking about when I talk about reasons.